What if I told you the greatest betrayal didn't come from strangers, but from the ones who raised you? You might have ignored that voice inside you for years, the whisper that something wasn't right. Maybe you told yourself, it's not that bad, or every family has issues. You laughed off the sharp remarks, justified the silence, tolerated the cold stares. But the truth? You were born into a game you never agreed to play. They told you it was love. But love isn't supposed to feel like guilt, like fear, like shrinking every time you enter a room. You were made to carry their shame, their disappointments, their unmet dreams. You became their emotional sponge before you could even speak in full sentences. When they were angry, you were the target. When they were sad, you were the comfort. When they failed, you became the reason. They said things like, "You're too sensitive," or "Why do you always make everything about you," when you were simply asking to be seen, to be heard, to be protected. You were never the child. You were the emotional dump. You were the scapegoat. You were the sacrifice. It didn't start as loud abuse. It began in quiet ways. The sighs when you walked into the room. The sudden silence when you spoke. The way your accomplishments were met with envy, not celebration. As you got older, the weight grew heavier. You began to believe the lie, that you were the problem. But here's what they never wanted you to know. You were never the problem. You were just the most aware. You saw through the cracks. You questioned things others were too afraid to question. That made you dangerous in a system built on silence and shame. They didn't want truth. They wanted control. You see, toxic families often function like cults. There are unspoken rules. Don't question. Don't challenge. What happens inside, stays inside. And if you do speak out, they label you dramatic, ungrateful, disrespectful. You were cast as the troublemaker. But that label was a cage. Because when they called you difficult, what they really meant was, you won't let us lie to ourselves. They made your independence a threat. Your emotional intelligence a problem. Your strength a weakness. So they broke you down, slowly, consistently, intentionally. Every decision you made was dissected. Every instinct questioned. Every success downplayed. If you started to grow, they pulled you back. If you started to feel joy, they reminded you of how much you owed them. What they feared the most wasn't your rebellion. It was your freedom. Because if you got free, they would have to face who they really were without you to blame. But here's the truth they tried so hard to hide. You were always the strong one. You were always the smart one. You were always the chosen one. They knew it long before you did. They felt your light and tried to dim it, because it shined too brightly on their own shadows. They saw your fire and tried to drown it, because it reminded them of everything they gave up on in themselves. They weren't just trying to hurt you. They were trying to stop you. Because if you ever realized who you really were, you wouldn't need them anymore. And nothing scared them more than your independence. But you're here. You're reading this. Which means something inside you has already woken up. Maybe you don't have all the answers yet. Maybe some days you still question your worth. But make no mistake. You are not broken. You are awakening. This story is not about blame. It's about clarity. It's not about staying stuck in the past. It's about finally seeing it for what it was, so you can let go and rise. So let this be your permission. You don't have to carry the weight of their wounds anymore. You don't have to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You can walk away. Even if they call you selfish. Even if they smear your name. Even if the silence that follows feels unbearable. Because on the other side of that silence is you. The real you. The one that was buried beneath years of guilt and gaslighting. The one who is finally ready to breathe without permission. You've survived their version of you. Now it's time to become your own. Take the first step. Even if it's small. even if it's shaky. Step toward the life they told you didn't deserve, but you always did. You'd think that once you realize the truth, once you finally name what happened to you, it would feel like freedom. But at first, it feels like hell. Because the truth doesn't just set you free. It burns everything that isn't real on its way out. The moment you start to see clearly, really see, you begin to unravel. And that unraveling can feel like breaking. You cry in the middle of the night for reasons you can't explain. You get angry at things that didn't used to bother you. You question every memory, every relationship, every belief you were taught to accept as fact. It's disorienting. You begin to wonder, have I lost my mind? No. You haven't. You're just finally leaving theirs. And they feel it. Because the moment you stop playing the role they wrote for you, the emotional caretaker, the fixer, the obedient one, they panic. They call you selfish. They say you've changed. They guilt trip you with nostalgia. You used to be so sweet. We did our best for you. How could you treat family this way? But these aren't questions. They're weapons. Designed to make you second-guess yourself. Designed to pull you back into the cage, just when you were learning how to fly. You might even go back at first. Apologize when you didn't do anything wrong. Try to keep the peace. But each time, it feels worse. Because you can't unsee the truth. You try to return to the old version of yourself, the agreeable one, the small one, but something inside you won't fit back into that mold anymore. That's when you realize. Healing isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's standing in front of a mirror with tears in your eyes and whispering, "This wasn't my fault." The truth is, when you begin to heal, you will lose things. You'll lose relationships that were built on your silence. You'll lose identities you wore just to survive. You'll lose the illusion that they ever really knew you. But what you gain, it's worth everything. You start to feel safe in your own body. You start to recognize the difference between real love and manipulation. You start to rebuild trust, not with them, but with yourself. And in that process, something begins to shift. You no longer feel the need to explain your healing to those committed to your wounding. You no longer seek closure from those who were never honest with you. You stop negotiating your worth. Because you finally understand. You were not put on this earth to absorb other people's pain. You were not born to be the balm for someone else's emotional wounds. You do not owe anyone your destruction, especially not in the name of family. One day, maybe not today, you will wake up and feel different. Not fixed. Not perfect. But steady. You will look in the mirror and see someone who chose truth over comfort. Someone who chose growth over guilt. Someone who finally said, "Enough." They'll say you've changed. And you'll smile. Because yes, you have. You're no longer the version of yourself that let pain pass as love. You're no longer the person who needed permission to feel whole. You're no longer afraid of walking away from what breaks you. You're becoming someone new. Or maybe, someone who was always there. Waiting for you. Beneath the layers of survival and silence. You survived. Not just the abuse. Not just the gaslighting. But the silence after the storm. That quiet space, where the noise of the past fades, and you're left with nothing but yourself. And at first, that silence feels unbearable. Because for so long, your identity was built around them. Their moods. Their approval. Their rules. Without their voices telling you who you were, you're left with one terrifying question. Who am I without them? But day by day, you begin to answer. Not with words. With choices. You begin to unlearn. You stop saying sorry for things that don't require apology. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop doubting the way your body tightens when someone tries to cross them. You start doing things that feel good, not performative, not pleasing, but true. And for the first time, you feel yourself coming back online. You buy the book you were told was a waste of time. You wear the colors they mocked. You laugh louder. Cry easier. And maybe, just maybe, you dance in your kitchen with no one watching. You create rituals. Journaling. Long walks. Saying no without explaining why. You take deep breaths when the shame creeps in, and you let it pass. You look in the mirror and whisper, "I'm allowed to be okay." And still, there are days when the grief returns. The old programming sneaks back in. You hear their voice in your head, telling you you're selfish, dramatic, difficult. But now, you recognize that voice. And you speak back. That's not mine anymore. Because healing doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you stop living like it's still happening. It means you take back control. Not just over your environment, but over your inner world. And something incredible begins to happen. You start attracting people who don't want to control you. People who see your softness as strength. People who don't need to dim your light to feel better about theirs. You start to feel what real love actually is. Love that doesn't make you small. Love that doesn't weaponize your truth. Love that isn't earned through sacrifice. And when you look back at who you were, at what you endured, you don't feel bitterness anymore. You feel clarity. Because now you know. It was never about becoming lovable. You were lovable all along. It was never about fixing yourself. It was about seeing that you were never broken, just buried. Under their shame. Their fear. Their projections. But you dug your way out. And with dirty hands and a tender heart, you started planting something new. A life that is yours. Not designed to please. Not built on pain. But rooted in choice. And growing in truth. You don't remember the exact moment it happened. Maybe it was the morning you woke up and didn't dread the day ahead. Maybe it was when someone crossed the line, and for the first time, you didn't flinch or explain. Maybe it was when you caught your reflection in the mirror and thought, "I'm proud of you." It didn't arrive like fireworks. It came like sunrise. Quiet. Gradual. Undeniable. You had become someone else. Or maybe, someone more you than ever before. The version of you they tried to destroy never really died. She just waited. And now? She's leading. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You no longer accept crumbs and call it love. You no longer apologize for taking up space in a world that once told you to be small. You've stopped asking, "Why did they do this to me?" Now you ask, "Why did I believe them?" And you answer with compassion. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. You forgive yourself for staying too long. For trying too hard. For believing it was your fault. Because it wasn't. You were a child in a burning building, and you found your way out. That is not weakness. That is survival. That is power. And now you understand something they never wanted you to know. They were never afraid of your mistakes. They were afraid of your truth. They feared what would happen if you ever stepped fully into who you are, because deep down, they always knew what you were capable of. They felt it before you did. They tried to bury it before it bloomed. But it bloomed anyway. Because truth doesn't die. It waits. And now that you've stopped fighting to be loved by the wrong people, you've opened the door to everything that's meant for you. Peace. Authentic relationships. Laughter that doesn't end with shame. Work that aligns with your soul, not just your skills. A life that fits, not because you forced it, but because you chose it. This is your legacy. Not just that you healed, but that you became a lighthouse for others still lost in the storm. Your story matters. Your courage is a map. And every time you speak, someone else whispers, "Maybe I can too." Because now you know. Healing is not a destination. It's a return. To your voice. To your body. To your power. To you. You are not who they said you were. You never were. You are fire. You are truth. You are rebirth. So don't just survive your story, own it. Wear it like armor. Speak it like medicine. Share it like light. You've already done the hardest part. You saw the truth and chose yourself. Now walk forward, head high, heart open, not to prove anything, but because you are finally free. Tell your story. Set your boundaries. Build the life they said you didn't deserve, because it was always yours. This is your time. Not to fix yourself, but to celebrate the version of you they never got to break.